The following is a presentation of Tuning into Sci-Fi TV, the viewer's guide to genre television.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Small Council Matters podcast. I am Wendy Hembrock, and our council is back in session. So let's go around the table. Introduce yourselves, please, maesters.
This is Christine from Michigan, your mistress of correction, and I feel under pressure.
Hey everybody, this is Shannon from out in the Pacific Northwest, and rats, it's what's for dinner.
I am Jesse Jackson from Dallas, Texas, Jesse Jackson DFW on social media, and I am mistress of happiness, sunshine, and all things Springsteen, and there was not a lot of rainbows on this episode.
No, I am Wendy, your maester of links and interesting news topics, and I am actually really, really angry. Maybe I'm even enraged.
Feel the rage.
We are so happy to be with you tonight. We are talking about episode 3 of season 3, Rhaenyra Triumphant. And boy, if this is winning, I'm not sure if we want more winning. Just a reminder, we love to hear from you. Ravens, comments, calls. Please drop by our Game of Thrones channel in Discord. We have one for the TV only fans, and we have one for the spoiler book reader folks as well. You can also contact us on our social media. We are at SCM_pod. Or you can follow the link in the show notes to click on that and leave us a message, or you can do it the old-fashioned way on the telephone. Call us at 706-927-8478 and leave us a message. So before we dive into all the details of this episode, first I want to just talk about some of the news and links we've got. First is a cast roundtable of a lot of the cast talking together. It's probably about a 15-minute discussion. Very entertaining. We also have the inside the episode if you didn't catch it when the show aired. We also have the house that the dragons built, which is that whole making of stuff, which is a little bit longer. It's probably about almost 20 minutes. And we have a link to the trailer for next week. So, first, any thoughts on any of those things?
Yeah, I actually shared the cast roundtable link, which actually came out a couple of weeks ago, but I just discovered it and I really liked it. It's got 6 of the actors sitting at a dinner table asking each other questions. One of them was what improvised moments made it into the show. Matt Smith apparently has all of his improvised moments cut out, so we don't get to see any of them. But we actually saw one of these improvised moments this episode. It was when Rhaenyra looked to Lord Corlys for input, and he bounced it right back to her, and she said, "Useless." That apparently was not in the script, but it made it in, and I felt like it really belonged there. They also do some party tricks. Lord Ormond, or I don't remember his name, the actor's name. He does a very classy mouth trumpet. And Aegon does a good Donald Duck. It's just some cozy fun. This episode, the House That Dragons Built, the focus was really about shooting the episode from Rhaenyra's point of view. All of the changes in style built around her point of view, no over-the-shoulder shots from behind other people because she wouldn't see that. And you wouldn't think they could talk so long about something seemingly simple, but it's quite interesting. Definitely worth a look.
I did not see the House the Dragons Built this time, but I did see a separate interview with Clara Kilner where she talked about that technique and a lot of the stuff she did to really put us with Rhaenyra on that whole journey that she took in that episode. And, she proved last week she can do the big bombastic stuff. And, with this episode, the more intimate stuff, she's just done a terrific job, directing her episodes. And I agree with you on the cast roundtable. It's clear from that they all like each other quite a bit, and they all seem like just absolutely adorable people, and have a good time. And that was really fun way to spend 15 minutes watching them. So good stuff there.
Yeah, as always, they do a great job of behind the scenes talking about it. And what I find interesting is they rotate what they talk about. Like, there's so many burn special effects. You could talk about that every episode. But this time they talked a lot about the direction and how we're doing it. So it was very interesting for a kind of a kind of different type of episode. So it was a kind of different behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's a great point. This was a very different kind of episode. And this, thinking of this as the first episode of season 3, if they had followed their own plan, it definitely would have been an interesting premiere. It definitely wasn't table setting like you would normally get. Although it had jumped forward, maybe half a day, not too much from, the recent events, long enough for Alicent and Helena to get to their bedroom. And, in theory, the throne room had to get cleaned up. The blood seemed to have come up pretty well from, Otto. And, the cast, I did see that, but it was back a couple of weeks ago. The thing that I remember about it was how sweet they all were to each other. They all said something nice about each other. It was very touching. Matt Damon. There's your first Matt Damon.
Take a drink.
Matt Smith shout out. Matt Smith, was very funny, and it's just so interesting because him in real life, he just comes across so much younger than a lot of the characters he plays. And
So
Emma
much
Darcy,
shy.
You really get to see that she's a real actor because her real character is so much different than the character she's playing. The thing that I immediately thought of when you mentioned the POV was, I got to really study that wig she's wearing because
I was looking
we
at
got
it
to see
too.
the back of her head and the side and her profile and that hair. And I kept thinking, oh, this is how it's similar to Dany's and this is how it's different from Dany's. And, one of the things I really appreciated was that her braid is not perfect. It kind of, is a little bit, it's not perfectly straight. It's got some fat spots to it. So that was funny. But I definitely did appreciate the direction in this episode. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more when we get into the details.
Pat posted on my Facebook, because I said I'm doing the small council tonight. And he said, I didn't have time to write an email. Rhaenyra shouldn't fire her old counselor still on Dragonstone. She needs to bring them to King's Landing to take care of the candle tallow problem and the coordinating sheep, wool, mutton, dragon feeding problems. She needs to delegate all the mundane stuff and focus on burninating Ormond Hightower. I'm curious to how well the Darren fake out played out with non-book readers. My wife was surprised. I was not, since there's no mention of fake Darren being held captive in Fire and Blood. So I'm waiting for Alicent to go, who is this child, when presented to Darren. And fans got Rhaenys for not wiping out most, not all, of Alicent's kids at Aegon's coronation. Will people be mad at Daemon for not unleashing his dragons on Armin's big army? So thank you, Pat, for feedback.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the strong bag shout out there, and the request for burninating the arming. I think Daemon was probably under orders not to do that unless they did not stand down, and he's being a good boy right now. So that's why that happened. I wasn't super shocked about Daron. Like, the moment Allison came in and looked at it, I was like, see that right there? That's that lack of poker face I was talking about. 'Cause right on her face, I was like, oh, that isn't him. That so isn't him. So, and it didn't surprise me at all. I was like, because Ormond is just sleazy. You know, there's a pretentious jerk about him. Anybody who brings a pomander to war. But again, thank you so much for your feedback, Pat.
Yeah, Pat, it's always great to hear from you. A funny encapsulation of some of the key points on there. As you know, I'm a book reader, and I thought something was hinky with Daron because when they announced the casting, but we still haven't seen him. And then there was that one person that looked like Ormond Squire, I think in the first episode where we met him, that had brownish reddish hair. And then that did not look like the person that came out in the cold open to this week's episode. You know, and then they actually kind of laid it in a little bit, when I think Rhaenyra says something like, I thought he was older or something like that, you know.
He's younger than I thought.
Yeah. And Christine, you're right about Allison's poker face. You know, she wasn't trying necessarily to hold it in, but she definitely had that, who the hell is this? Look on her face. And, Rhaenyra clocked it immediately. So I thought that was good. And it was a good switcheroo, which just adds another thing to Rhaenyra's very long, no good, terrible day. You know, when they find that out. So anyway, yeah, good observations, Pat. Thanks. And we got to do something about the tallow, man. Can't be in the dark.
Very important. Put the small council on housekeeping.
Yeah, right before Wendy says, I did notice they said in the podcast that Rhianna going like this back and forth was not in the script, and they kept it because it was like, what, why? And so, yeah, great, Pat. As always, we love hearing from you.
Yes, thank you, Pat, our maester in the wild. We so appreciate your thoughts. The thing that struck me as very odd with the whole Daron thing was, and I've only watched the episode once, so I'll have to go back, but I thought Daemon said, we're taking your kid and his dragon. And I was thinking, well, how are they going to get the dragon back if this kid doesn't fly it? And obviously you would know that he wasn't the kid because he wouldn't be able to fly the dragon. Maybe that wasn't said, and maybe I was just thinking it, but
it wasn't explicitly.
I was very confused. That. Okay. I mean, I remember him saying we're taking him, and then when I saw him walk across, I was like, who's going to get the dragon back? You know, is it just going to follow them home? I didn't think that would work. So that seemed like a big mistake, overall, but, you know, we'll find out. The scene itself was wonderful, and I loved the way that Matt Smith played it, because he obviously was, sort of disappointed that there'd be no massive burning today, you know, when he's talking to Ormond. And well played by Ormond to, basically sucker them into thinking that they would just give up, that easily. So, interesting plots going on. I do agree that, you know, with the rat problem they've got, Rhaenyra should have been thinking to put somebody from her small council from Dragonstone on that, at least. So thank you, Pat. As always, we very much appreciate hearing from you. Now, let's move on to, first some quick review ratings and thoughts.
Real quick, I just double checked. He did mention the dragon, but he did not mention taking the dragon. He said it would be remiss of them to allow Aegon's successor to be running around the Reach with a dragon, no less. So that's the only time the dragon was mentioned. I really don't know how they would force him to fly with them, though. So, quick reviews. I must say, the article we saw a couple of weeks ago proclaiming this episode the best of the show so far must have been written by a masochist. I felt the stress while watching. It felt so very familiar to me. The constant barrage of things that only Rhaenyra can deal with, and getting shot down at every turn. Well, I must say, when I try to explain my pain to people, I'm just going to point at this episode. But I watch shows like this to escape all that, so I have to give this episode a little bit of a ding. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 uncomfortable stylings.
If I had seen it prior to the season in an advanced review, I would have raved about it too. To me, this is my first perfect 10 of the season. I adored this episode. It was different in format, anchored by a tremendous performance by Emma Darcy, who is in virtually every scene, except for the opening. And the emotions that she deals with and the nonverbal acting she does, just sensational. The rest of the cast was also very, very good. The direction made you feel things emotionally and made you feel what Rhaenyra was going through. And probably, of all the things to be impressed with in this episode, I got to shout out Ramin Djawadi's score. It was superb. It may be one of the best scores in all of the Thrones, Night, Dragon trilogy of shows. It was just so good. It was almost Hitchcockian, in the tension that it ramped up through strings. And then not only the score, but the sound design where they brought in, the sound of like blood rushing in your head from pressure or stress and heartbeat. You could hear that. You could occasionally hear the rats chirping or making little noises or scurrying in the background. In addition to that, we scored just, a masterpiece for me.
Yeah, I acknowledge that it's really well done. I think it's a little overpraised. I'm glad that you loved it that much. This was certainly an interesting take. I think when we get into talking about favorite scenes, there's stories I want to tell about this. But for now, yeah, I think it's a solid, and I'm glad they did this creatively and to try something different, and it looked good. It is as close to a bottle episode they're going to have if you ignore the field. But bottle episodes are usually ways to save money, and this certainly didn't look like it saved money. But I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 walk and talks.
Yeah, this was definitely Rhaenyra and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. That
was the working title.
Yeah. That, sitting the throne and ruling is very different than the battle to win the crown. And she hasn't won the war. She's only won one battle so far. And she might have gotten tricked out of a battle, or Daemon certainly got tricked out of a chance to burn a lot of high towers. I would give this 8 out of 10 roasted rat plate specials.
Mmm.
Yum, yum. It's what all the small folk are talking about. So let's get into some of the details and the highlights for this episode. And we're going to start off with Christine.
So difficult to pick a highlight in an episode that is a constant plague on the main character. It all blended together in a montage of pain. But I'm probably going to upset Shannon because I want to call out the camera work and sound design that went into making the audience feel the pressure that Rhaenyra was feeling. Because yes, I actually noticed the score. I don't usually notice the score, so that says something. There were a lot of uncomfortable sounds happening. We heard a few, I want to say, deep bell chimes that seemed to hit Rhaenyra right in the gut. A lot of suspended strings creating a lasting tension that never seemed to want to resolve. Even some sharp hits on those strings that just popped out and made you... Hitchcockian is a very good word for it. Absolutely. And then there was, not the score so much, but, just the way they played with the recorded audio from the scenes. Frequently, speech that wasn't directed straight at Rhaenyra would go fuzzy and soft, which allowed us to kind of tune them out with her. And in addition to all the audio tricks that were happening to make us feel this tension, the camera was frequently tight on her face so we could feel her discomfort. The space around her would go blurry, as I imagined her vision would be at times when everything was really getting to her. There were also a lot of quick cuts to different angles, and a lot of the times when that was happening, there was chaos going around, happening around her during this. Like from a lot of it was the tearing down of the high tower colors. I mean, this whole episode left a bitter taste in my mouth, and that is a testament to the skills of the people behind the camera. This was executed very well.
Yeah, I highlighted that in my quick review, and I'm glad you touched on it, Christine. It's just everything that they did just added to it. You know, I mean, it was a great central performance. It was sound design of when sound kind of dropped out and went in for conversation she was having. It was background noise, the scurrying rats. And then again, that score. God, what was the other piece of the score that struck me as really notable from Game of Thrones was the one where Cersei blows up the Sept. You know, that
it was the first time they used piano.
Right, exactly. That led into that opening. When you do something different, you know, you're used to it and the score is usually great, but when you do something different, it kind of stands out. And I think the strategic decision to do it here and the execution of it was just masterful. And I said Hitchcockian, it was much like Bernard Herrmann's score for Psycho or, you know, a lot of the other tense thrillers where a master in control of suspense uses all the tools at his disposal to evoke a certain feeling in the audience. And that's what everybody involved with the production did for this one. Yeah, I was constantly on edge, and I know what's coming, you know, for the most part, because I've read the books. But this was just a superb execution from every single department. Great choice.
Yeah, I love that you picked, you know, this behind the scenes, you know, craft that people are doing. It is so, this show is, it takes so many people to make this and to make it so beautiful. And a lot of the things that you guys are mentioning is your subconscious understanding it more than actually, oh, that's like, oh, look, that director's really showing off something. That's a cool, you know, visual stunt or something. No, this is just the suspense and and I think this is a good time to tell the story. I was at the second President Bush's presidential library, and one of the exhibits is that you go in there and they have a kiosk where everyone votes on a crisis that happened in the Bush administration. You know, Katrina, 9/11, other different things. And so the question is, should the government federalize troops to go to Katrina? And then it lists pros and cons politically, socially, economically. And when you push and you listen to the pros, you go, damn straight, that's what you should do. And then listen to the cons and you go, oh my God, that would be the worst decision ever. And it really showed that when you're the president or when you're the queen, people coming to you, there are no easy questions. They're all, and you have really, if you're good, you have really smart people around you that are giving you both sides. That it's just most of them aren't easy, because if they were easy, somebody else would all take it, which is what Pat's point was. A small council would be doing that for her at this point. So yeah, I think they talked about on the podcast that usually, and the queen is victorious and they lived happily ever after. Well, this is day one after that. except as you guys have mentioned, she really hasn't won the war. She just thinks she has. So yeah, just a brilliant episode in that way. And I'm glad we called out the themes.
So I'm going to first piggyback on Jesse's comment, because I was listening to a lot of things related to the opening of Teddy Roosevelt's library, which happened on July 4th. And one of the things that I was listening to was an author talking about what was called his tennis racket cabinet. So Roosevelt had about 30 really competent advisors. And this author was actually talking about it's the people around you and how you absorb and ingest that information and digest it and turn it into what your policy is going to be that is ultimately led to, what we think of as a very successful president in Teddy Roosevelt. So your comments made me think of that. So thank you, Jesse. This is a great choice, Christine. What I was thinking about was how well they cued the discordant music to, there's so many emotions going on in this episode. In the opening shot, she's talking about there's so many ghosts here, and she's terrified of sleeping in her father's bed. And then when she actually sees somebody walk by who she thinks is Jace, and she went from having this conversation about, I shouldn't kill Daron. He's my half brother. He wasn't involved. And then she sees the ghost walk by, and immediately she's like, well, wait a minute. My sons are dead. I can kill anybody I want. And Viseria basically says, yeah, you're right. You can kill anybody you want. So we really got, it was a psychological, study, right? This wasn't about special effects. It was, how can we use all the elements of, the storytelling to show what's happening to this character? And, maybe we're going to find out she really wasn't ready to rule, and maybe she's not really going to do that great of a job. And, she's certainly making what I consider a lot of poor decisions, around, building a coalition, to, refer to Bush number 1, who did build the coalition. So, that's a great choice. I love that choice, Christine. Thank you. So, does that leave anything else for us to talk about?
I certainly hope so.
Well, I spent the first half of this podcast talking about Emma Darcy's Emma-worthy performance and the score and the mood and all that stuff. So I'm going to pick a scene that has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. So I like the cold open. This is the first time since the pilot of House of the Dragon that we had a cold open. The show normally doesn't do it. And it was kind of a shock as a viewer when you see it coming, but I like how it sets up everything that follows. You've got, the two soon to be knights on their dragons there with Daemon. It's wonderfully staged. The special effects are great. The dragons are great. But you've got Daemon at his absolute peak smugness, which I always enjoy seeing. He knew he had the goods, and he was ready to burn some people. But as you guys noticed earlier, he's trying to be a good boy and do things the right way and the way his queen wants to do it, which is kind of, as revealed in a later conversation, she wants to try to do things like she thought her father did, and not go all mad queen. Even though there hasn't been a mad king or mad queen necessarily yet, but regardless, the way that Daemon handled that quote unquote negotiation, with Ormond Hightower, and Ormond was also perfectly confident and smug, but I don't think he betrayed the fact in his acting that it was all kind of a ruse and he had other cards up his sleeve. I think he played it more as disaffected and disinterested and like, okay, you've got a couple of aces up right here. So I have to realize when I am not at the advantage, and I'll say the right things and I'll just go on back to Old Town. Was kind of and then Damon did his Columbo of, and one more thing, we need the prince. And, they brought him out, and then, that's when the old switcheroo happened. And as a viewer, we talked about it on previous episodes, but we thought we saw it with the redhead guy, that looked like a squire in the first episode when Ormond was introduced. And then that first kind of gives you a hint that things may not be what they seem. And then it had moments of humor. Not only did Matt Smith wring every single drop of humor out of it, but I loved him asking Ulf if he wanted to be Lord of Hightown or Old Town. And Ulf just kind of looks perplexed. I don't think he really knows what to say to Damon at any point, for fear he'll get Dark Sister. So it was a change of pace in an episode that in itself, other than the scene, was also a change of pace, and the juxtaposition of those two really, really worked for me.
I was also surprised that we were getting a cold open because that is very rare. I had not realized how long ago it had been. And I think it was very smart creatively because it separated the episode, the style. Yes, it was really humorous. And, you talked a little bit about Aces. So, it did look like you were in, like, I've got the goods. It's my turn to bet. I know I have the goods, and there's nothing on this table that you can beat me with. And what I found interesting is, when the nephew, quote unquote, didn't speak, and then later in the episode, he didn't speak. I kept thinking, is there something wrong with him? Like, is he mentally unstable, or was there something else going on? But then I'm like, no, they had talked about, Allison's brother had talked about how charming he was and how nice. So I was like, but I did not suspect that we were doing, as you guys said, the switcheroo. So I love the way we set this up. I imagine, Damon is now going to be mad and embarrassed, and you wonder how much, are they going to hold him accountable for this? But the reality is, one skinny, Targaryen prince looks like another. They all look the same. They get, he was thinny, he's skin, he's got long blonde hair. What was I supposed to do?
Unless Harwin Strong fathered him, cough, cough.
It's funny you talk about the cold open, because when I was watching that, I was like, did I hit the skip on the credits? I was and I like that they changed the credits again. And they actually introduced this whole nother element of the fraying apart of the tapestry, which we had not seen before, which I really liked. The thing I really liked about this was it very much set my expectation about, we're going to get a great battle. And then instead we're going to get Damon giving a fantastic monologue. And then as Shannon pointed out, the Columbo, by the way, wait, there's one more, question. And I was a little bit disappointed that we weren't going to have a big battle, because it's like, everybody dressed up. They turned out, and there's nothing to do. And considering how different everything was after that, but again, it showed the mindset as well, because Damon is still in that battle mode mindset, throughout the episode as it continues. Because when he comes back and they're having their debrief in the bedroom, he says, I wanted to burn everybody, but I didn't, because you told me not to. Oh, and I brought back your cousin or your half-brother, whatever he is. I brought Daeron back. And I loved his delivery when he said it twice. In that scene, he's like, he's going to be a contender for the crown. You're going to have to kill him. And then later he says it again after they've had a discussion, and it's his exit line. He says it off camera. He says, and remember, you still got that kid you got to kill. And it was a moment to me of humor, but it was
don't
also
forget to take out the trash.
Yeah, but it was also very much, Damon still understands that we're still fighting the war. He's we see that in the small council when he's like, you can't listen to every complaint. We're in war. Everybody's got to suffer a little bit, that was his counter argument to Mysaria. So, I love this choice as a highlight and what it does set up for the rest of the episode.
I also thought
scene,
hold on, sorry.
Go ahead.
The Dread Pirate Roberts. Good night, Wesley. I'll probably kill you tomorrow, or whatever, don't forget. You still got to kill this guy.
Hey, it was a good thing she didn't kill him. 'Cause then we would have never known. This scene, I know I've referenced this like 1 or 2 episodes ago, but the scene made me think of Red versus Blue again. That's right. War's over. We won. Turns out you're the big hero. 'Cause that's how this scene felt. Like, yeah, by the way, the war is over. We won. Yeah, and it's like, is the war over? I really feel like there's different types of war, and like phase 1 is now over. The outright battle portion is over, and now we've moved on to wheeling and dealing, and that's what this scene is. And I gotta say, Daeron's dragon in this scene looks very small, being dwarfed by those other 3 dragons. I'm actually surprised it's big enough to carry even a kid. Then there was that a little humor with Daemon offering Old Town to Ulf. I'm like, he was just talking about getting a castle, and I was really surprised he managed to keep his trap shut when he got thrown that bone. I expected some banter from him. I mean, it was an opening. Instead, he just looks over at Hugh with a knowing look, and Hugh looked back like he was thinking about that conversation too. And I mean, it was subtle. But I really feel like we should have gotten a little more from Ulf, but maybe Daemon gave them explicit orders. Don't you dare say anything. This
thinking is not required.
Yeah,
nor
not
speaking.
required. Yes, exactly. Maybe those are just standing orders right there. Yeah, this was an odd tone setter. Kind of like we look like we're all out ready for war, and we just have a conversation. And the conversation goes smoothly. So it was that awkwardness. It really set the tone for the rest of the episode. It's like everything's going according to plan, right? So it was definitely an interesting way to open the episode and before the credits.
So you guys have left me a lot to choose from. And so I mentally flipped a coin between we could do A Knight's Tale and where that led to, but I'm instead going to do Alicent and Rhaenyra, their discussions. These are they are their oldest friends. And despite all the baggage, she just killed her father, yet Alicent could tell something's going on with Rhaenyra, right? When she asked about, can I take the old man's body and bury it next to my mother? And Rhaenyra had enough knowledge, like, you've done this job. You ran the kingdom for a while. What advice you got me? And she doesn't want to hear it. But I thought that was really good advice. You're going to have to do horrible things. You're going to have to do things that you would never imagine doing. And it's going to eat you away a little bit every day. And it is a fact that if you take a picture, and I know we're talking real world politics, but in almost every case, you take a picture of a president when they started their administration and the picture as they leave their administration, whether it's 4 or 8 years, there's a lot of aging that has gone there, because this is a horribly hard job. And especially if you don't micromanage, if you don't have a plan. And so I had wondered before I'd watched the episode, if you had not killed her father, would Alicent be a good, quiet cabinet member, right? A quiet, like you couldn't put her on the small council, but could you have just used her on the sly, right? And then I'm like, well, no way after she killed her father. I always said that which God help me, thank God I've never been, but I always thought if I was president of the United States, I would have a monthly lunch of everyone else who used to be president would come and go, okay, you 3 or 4 people are the only people I understand what I'm doing. Let's have club sandwiches and talk about all the crap that's going on. So I'm going to talk about that scene. I love them together. I love that even after all this turmoil, that this, and maybe I'm being overly sentimental, but this bond of friendship is still there. And I thought it was great to see it. And it made for, once again, especially Shannon said, these scenes were not in the book. I think this has made the story, it's added texture and some, drama to it that's really rich.
I'm not sure I agree with how many times she went to talk to Alicent in here. The busting in, where's the gold scene, that made a lot of sense to me. And Alicent pointing out, she's like, look, I did my part. You're mad because these men are screwing you over. She's like, I did the part. I got the doors open. I got nobody shooting your dragons. We tried to flee, which you said we'd be free, and now I'm your prisoner. But when she talks about the petitions and listening to the people, and I loved her comment where she says, where Rhaenyra is like, I'm not going to change. My father didn't change. And she says, your father lived in a world of his own construction. You and I have never set foot there. And I loved that. I also really liked generally in this episode how much we were getting callbacks to his rule and the things that were going on in the court that were not necessarily the direct people machinations, but just what courtly life is like. You have these, I'll call them low-level nobles. You've got everybody in the household coming at you, stuff, which, up to this point, that hasn't been the point of the war. It's been, unseating the usurper. And now the dog caught the car, and the car's full of rats. and some people consider the people the rats. So this was a great choice. And I think we might talk about just the choice of having her talk to Alicent so much in this episode at some point too.
So we did get some feedback from Denise on the Discord channel. One thing she pointed out was that Rhaenyra was never prepared to rule. She was never taught or given any responsibility close to ruling. And now it's coming out. And she does something that at least a wise person would do. And that's go to the person she has at least a little trust in, who clearly knows how to do this. Alicent has the experience. She's done it. She did it for a very long time. She did it as a woman in a man's world. I think it's great that she breaks breaks like the mask for a bit and just goes, talk to me, tell me what you did and how you dealt with this. But she also backpedals because Alicent gives it to her straight. And the truth is, like, Alicent was very faithful. She was a churchgoer. She believed in helping everybody and always doing what was right. But the truth is, in that position, what's right is really hard to be, it's not very clear. What's right for this person is wrong for this person. What's right for this group is going to essentially harm the larger group. But if I don't help them, they might die. And these compromises they don't seem to have a right answer. And I think sometimes a person can only learn a lesson when they've been burned by it. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. Well, what do you mean? And touch, ow, oh, okay, now I get it. And I think Rhaenyra is going to have to get burned before the lesson lands home. And I do want to point out, that the first scene, we also had Helaena there. We have not gotten a lot of dialogue from Helaena, but this was the most sense she's ever made. She says it in a very, very, like, autistic way, but she's like, we were fleeing, we were leaving. You said we could. And I'm like, it's a fair point. She's right. And she just doesn't answer her. And she also says she doesn't want to stay in that room. I don't know if it's that room in particular. Maybe she wanted to stay in her old room. I don't know. I don't know what about that room is off-putting to her, but she also doesn't get acknowledged. And I think that was a little rude of Rhaenyra. I mean, she's never thought anything bad about Helaena. And I think she should have at least given her a moment on that. But I will forgive her a bit. She has been getting very overwhelmed this episode. I mean, she came in there fiery because the gold's gone. And, everybody says, well, she didn't have a plan. I'm like, well, the plan was the crown has gold. The plan was never, somebody took the gold and scattered it to the winds. We have no idea where it went. And by the way, that guy who did it is probably dead. Probably, by the way, we have to assume is what they said. I'm still holding out for Lord Tyland, still being alive. So, but these were great scenes. And while I know there was no further conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent in the book, this show is really about these two. So whether history records it or not, I think these scenes are necessary and add a lot to the show.
Yeah, I brought that point up before that as a book reader, it established that Alicent and Rhaenyra were childhood friends, but everything that's happened in their adult lives and their ongoing connection is a show invention and a wonderful show invention at that. I love the way those two play off of each other. And you're right, the first scene was a little harsh, and I liked it in the second scene. Alicent even acknowledges that. That, sorry, I was a little curt with you and whatever. And the first part, she also, there's some empathy there because they're both women. And in Westerosi society, women are overlooked and treated as second-class citizen. And I loved Alicent's line that was, will you blame me only for what men have done? I just thought that was a great thing because that's when she was saying, I left the gates open. I sent Aemon away. I did everything you asked of me. Yeah, so that was a good point. And then the softening that you see Rhaenyra do a little bit when she doesn't come right out and say, help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope, but, tell me what happened there. And it harkens back to, a quote from Robert, to Ned in the first book, which is really kind of a thesis statement for this episode. This is Robert. I swear to you, sitting on a throne is 1,000 times harder than winning one. Laws are a tedious business and counting coppers is worse. And the people, there is no end to them. I sit on that damnable iron chair and listen to them complain until my mind is numb and my ass is raw. They all want something, money or land or justice. The lies they tell, and my lords and ladies are no better. I am surrounded by flatterers and fools. It can drive a man to madness, Ned. Half of them don't tell me the truth and the other half can't find it. You know, that's kind of like all of the shows that we've seen thus far, you know, because it's called Game of Thrones and the Iron Throne is such an important motif in this story, but it's never as easy as the winning it. You know, you lose lives and you get burned alive and everything, but it's what you do with it. And it kind of harkens back to a George R.R. Martin interview. I think it was Rolling Stone, when he was talking about the difference between him and Tolkien, and he wanted to be grittier and realer. And people kind of make fun of George's quote on this. He's like, what is Aragorn's tax policy? You know, what's it? It's like, oh, he just ruled for thousands of years or whatever. But I love that we're getting into the realism of it. You know, it's like, oh, because some people murdered his kid. So Aegon was so childish, he said, let's kill every freaking rat catcher in the entire King's Landing. And now, because of that one little thing, now it's compounded. And all the decisions that all these people make, Alicent, Rhaenyra, everybody else, it just multiplies. And it's like that tapestry unweaving for the first time in the opening credits. So I think there's some empathy between the two. And even at their hardest, like, hey, you just cut my dad's head off. But, you know, I can understand the little of what you're going through because I sat here when Viserys did it and then even held it at arm's length when Aegon has done it. So, I love those scenes between the two of them. That's a great choice.
Yeah, to Jesse's point earlier, who else can understand your situation besides another living president that you might pick up the phone and call? And these are the only two women, as far as we know, that were, you know, in the room where it happened and, you know, we're making those decisions. The other thing I was thinking about was Helena. I actually laughed when Alicent said, well, our plan was to kill Aegon. Like I agreed with your mother. And the look on Helena's face was like, I didn't see that. She definitely didn't know about that. I think that Helena is having flashbacks to her children being murdered. I mean, we have rats and rat catchers and all those elements repeated in this episode. And that goes back to Blood and Cheese. And, you know, she was talking about there's rats here in that episode. So I was kind of thinking that, you know, Rhaenyra talked about there's ghosts walking around. She has to be having some revisited trauma potentially from being in those chambers, from when her kids were killed or kid was killed. So that's a great choice. Wow, we're going very unconventional. I'm going to go slightly unconventional, maybe. I'm going to pick the scene where Daemon and Rhaenyra are debriefing in the looking out over the Red Keep after the rat banquet. And the thing I liked about this whole thing was hearing the crazy coming. You know, we talked about when is the crazy coming, and, you know, I think it's starting. Because Daemon's like, wow, I find your ploy amusing. And, you know, this will work, you know, taking the food and giving it to the small folk will work for, you know, it'll appease people for a couple of weeks until they're really hungry and, you know, whatever you stole is gone. But then he makes this really interesting comment when he says, you've come so far, yet we still don't know you. And he starts going into what I would call his vision. And he's like, why are you worrying about gold? We can go conquer the world. You know, it's like, dude, you can't even keep the Red Keep in order, which is what she points out. She's saying, I have to prove that I can run my household, let alone rule. And he's like, you're thinking too small. You know, we need to go back to the myth of old Valyria. It's like, let's focus on Dorne, Essos, the city at the end of the world where men have wings. and then, she's, this is obviously like some childhood story. And then he talks about we're meant to be gods. I always love when they start speaking to each other in, Valyrian. It always implies this intimacy between them and a connection between them that I always find appealing. But he's talking about we're supposed to be gods and, your father renounced Balerion, his dragon, he didn't get it. He turned his back on the power, and Rhaenyra's like, yes, but that's because he thought that, the dragons were, too much power. You couldn't have that much power. And this is, we talked last week about what's going to create a rift between the two of these. There's probably a lot of things potentially, but this lack of a shared vision, certainly might be part of that. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very funny when, she says, old Valyria ended with the doom, and he has no comment back about that. He just says, I'm out, basically, when he says, Your Grace. And then, but don't forget to kill that kid, too. And now he's going on a mission that he thinks is very appealing because he's going to the Eyrie, which was the place of his ex-wife who he killed. And he's going to get money, for Rhaenyra. And, he's definitely going to get some other news when he gets there. So that also was quite appealing to think ahead about what's coming. But it also tied into the conversations that happened earlier in the episode when she talked to the Septon, and the Septon talked about dragons are evil. This is a corrupted magic. They, you're not, I'm not going to anoint you. My gods do not deal in dragons. They are profane, magic of pride, lust for power, and impunity. No good comes of them. And that really, amps up her rage as well. So part of the reason I like this conversation is because, it is showing how she's becoming more and more disconnected from the small folk, anybody's view of reality. And, Daemon is even further along in terms of conditions on the ground, which are bad. We have no money. We have rats everywhere. We just found out that this kid is, not who he said he was. Listening to the people is really boring, and I don't have all the answers. So I muddled that with some other scenes, I realized, but, for me, it was planting the seed of how, what was her fantasy idea about what ruling was going to be. She's still living in that to some extent, and Daemon is supporting it. And by the end of this episode, when she learns the news about Tumbleton, that's hopefully going to, snap her back into the reality, but maybe not.
I'm glad you picked the scene because I was going to bring it up on a second go round if it didn't come up. When someone has a really stupid idea, like, let's just keep conquering the world, what I like to do is push it to the extreme and see how they react to that. It's like, Daemon, when you've conquered the entire world, then what? And it makes me think of that quote. And when Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Like, once you have it all, then you end up having to go to what Rhaenyra is doing right now. You have to rule it all. You can't just go to the Yi Ti for their riches so that you can solve your money problems back home, because then now you also rule Yi Ti, and they're having money problems because you took their money away. That's not how it works. And I want someone to shake him and be like, no, that we can't keep doing that. And it reminds me of in Game of Thrones when Dany was going through all the slaver cities and conquering all of them and then just moving on to the next one. Suddenly it came back to bite her in the ass because all those slaves she had freed were captured again. They were slaves again because she wasn't ruling. And so for a while, the idea was to just sit back and actually rule. She briefly gave up on her idea of going back to Westeros and winning her land back because she had land here. You can't do both. You can't just keep conquering the world. You also have to rule it. And I don't know. I think these two need a marriage counselor because one of them sees this and the other one is just like, we're supposed to be having fun. We're in charge. Like that's not what in charge is. It's not fun. And I feel like there should be a ticking clock as to like the point when Daemon stops being an ally and starts being a wild card again, because it's going to happen. But I do want to see what happens in the Vale. It's a wonderful combination going on there. I mean, we got, he hates the Vale because that's where his first wife was from, where he never liked her. He never liked any of that. And of course nobody there likes him. And he's going there to get money, which he had claimed he should get an inheritance because his wife had no heirs, so it's his now. So that's probably going to come up again. And then, of course, there's that whole Rhaenyra and the rogue dragon thing. And, oh yeah, that's your daughter. Did you forget about her? So that's going to be a wonderful drama bomb going off later on. See, it's just an example. Here he is leaving an uncomfortable situation thinking if I just keep moving, I won't have to deal with anything. But he's moving straight on into another uncomfortable situation. Daemon the Wildcard.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That was also on my short list of favorite scenes. I think in Daemon's case, what's the old saying? If you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So he's like, we've got 6 dragons. And Aegon and his sister wives had 3, and they conquered all of Westeros.
Yeah.
So that's where his head is at. And, again, we can go back to the original sin of Viserys not preparing anybody for anything. He tried to bring Daemon in, but it was oil and water and they never meshed. And from Daemon's perspective, it's like, you never made me hand to the king. You sent me off to do things you knew I would hate, because you didn't trust me. That's his take, and there's, Viserys' take was probably more reasoned than that. And he constantly defended Daemon to Otto and the rest of the small council, even though, Daemon frequently acted like an ass. But there was another line in his conversation with Rhaenyra that is like, what is it? I style us as gods.
Yeah.
That's where his head is at. And he truly sees them as like above the fray. And he wants to see men with wings and, conquer lands that they haven't even thought about and reestablish old Valyria and all that stuff. And I think it was fitting that they had a lot of that conversation in High Valyrian. And I love it when they do that. That's like it has always been that little thing between them and a little thing between Targaryens. And they're both so good at it. I would put Emma Darcy mid on the High Valyrian execution. I think Khaleesi, Daenerys was exquisite at it, but Matt Damon, add one to the tip jar. I think Matt Smith is really, really good at the High Valyria too. And it just sounds so natural coming out of his mouth. And I love that that's like their little shorthand, and he had a chance to storm off or try to argue with her and whatever, but he just exited with a quiet, Your Grace, at that scene. So I thought that was a lovely scene between the two of them there.
My drinking game is ramping up.
I also love this discussion, and I also thought of Alexander the Great's, statement, the legend of him, crying because there are no more worlds to conquer. Yeah, this is, he is just wanting more and more and more, right? And she really does, want to rule like she thought her father did. But I wonder how much of that ruling was actually Otto as the hand, because, the king is out making his little, models and such. And did he have a really good small council that, kept everything running? So I love their discussion. I love the intimacy when they talk High Valyrian. There is this, intimacy is the word. This togetherness. This, like last season when she shows up and he's apologizing to her, and it's just in that language. I love seeing that together. That it's almost like you can't lie when you're using that language. And I know that's probably not true, but it feels like they're speaking truth when they discuss this. So yeah, I think, he is a live wire for sure. And, his strengths are his weaknesses. And I don't know, right now he's behaving well, but he is always a wild card. So we'll see what happens next.
So remember back in, I guess it was season 1, right? When he and Lena are exiled to Essos and all he's doing is reading books in Old Valyrian, and he talks about Old Valyria. And then when he returns and he accosts Rhaenyra and he talks about, I want you to be my sister wife, just like Aegon, and their marriage was in the Old Valyrian styling. So to me, it was very consistent that he was in that world. And I mentioned earlier, I like the intimacy between them whenever they're speaking to each other in Valyrian. But I think the other piece to that is we have more of a vulnerable Daemon, because he's actually telling you, the things he really hopes and believes when they have those conversations a lot of the time, which I think is part of what creates that intimacy. So yeah, that was a big part of why I like that scene, but also because it was almost domestic. It was certainly, different from all the other things that were going on, because Daemon never walks in and asks her for anything. He's consistently like, what's our next move? Here's what we're doing. I did what you asked. He's not somebody that's petitioning her for anything yet. We'll see what comes in the future. So we went around once. More highlights?
The one thing we haven't talked about was the through line of Corlys wanting his sons legitimized. They have that nice dinner. Rhaenyra seems a little taken aback by it at the first. He asks. She says nothing. Then they get to her Ursat small council meeting, and where she throws out the useless line, Corlys is just kind of pouting and says, I defer to the queen. And then she's like, useless, whatever. And then they have that shouting match. Like, he starts dropping the bastard word as he's describing her kids, but by the time he gets to Jace, who, she's still grieving that death and seeing his ghosts in the halls, that he screams bastard almost as loud as his, once-headed brother said it too. So that's a very interesting through line. And that's a great argument, is when you can really see both sides of it. with two characters that you like and respect and are intrigued by. And I do see where both of them are coming from on that. So I thought that was an interesting scene.
So I wasn't going to bring this one up in the highlights because this is actually a low light for me. When they're at that dinner, and I can tell that Rhaenyra was hesitant about actually giving them the name, and not just the name, but the inheritance, wanting Alan to take over High Tide. And I honestly, at that point in the episode, could not understand why she was hesitant. I didn't understand what her problem was. And then when it comes out later that if she's raising up bastards to be lords, what does that say about her? And I'm like, I really feel like that just strengthens your position. Whether they were bastards or not, it doesn't matter, because if someone accepts them as part of the family, then they are. That is who you are. That is what your rule is. That is the world you want. That's the world you're accepting. I mean, these dragon seeds came in, and she lost the dragon trainers because of it, because they thought it was an affront to everything the dragon stood for. And she's like, I don't care. There's no riders for these dragons. I need dragons. And so when someone has value, actual quantifiable value to her, then the name doesn't matter. The lineage doesn't matter. Except in this one case. Like, I don't get the hang up. I don't. It upset me. It confused me. And it was actually my rating for this episode was uncomfortable stylings. And that was because we had Ulf trying to name himself a Targaryen. Absolutely not. We had, the Valerians trying to take their rightful name, and we didn't do that because she was uncomfortable with it. And we had Daemon trying to style them both as gods. Like, everybody's trying to claim names, and she's not having it. So, I don't know, it may have been the strain she was feeling, in taking over the castle and taking over the throne, but I really feel like this was a bad decision on her part, and it made not a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think this was a bad decision on her. I also think she could have played it better and said, I absolutely will do this. You have my word on it, just not right now. He could have laid, but she's just, well, maybe later. I don't know. And so that was not very smart. Now, I thought he was going to die because his brother, by saying the bastard word, did get his head chopped off. And I really thought, I said, okay, well, Corlys isn't going to make it out of this episode. She's going to have him killed. And it was very, off-putting, right? That he was so angry at her and so calling her on her BS and her hypocrisy. It was, hey, wow. And I agree with you, Christine. I don't understand the issue. They at least look like his sons, right? Her children, nothing. So, and as you're calling for your other, quote unquote bastard child to come to be your heir, yeah, I just think this is a really bad decision on her part. I give her a little bit of grace because I think she's in shock. I think she's in mourning. And I also think she's just overwhelmed by all the decisions she has to make. And, she's clinging to legitimacy. I haven't been blessed yet. I haven't, and anything that makes me look illegitimate and not a righteous queen is something I've got to put aside. But yeah, I loved the interactions between them. But I thought Corlys was about to lose his head.
Yeah, she's making the classic mistake, right? You know, you got to dance with who brung you, right? Corlys, the Valerians have been her only ally, you know, and he points that out. He's like, I was the first one to vouch for you, even though, you know, I knew that this was not legit, and, you know, I have eyes. I was shocked that he was yelling and calling the children bastards out in, you know, that courtyard for anybody to hear. I was waiting for someone to say, what you're saying is treason. So I was surprised that didn't come out of Rhaenyra's mouth or her City Watch / Kingsguard. But his timing was terrible also. And also Rhaenyra, you know, she's overwhelmed. She's not good at communicating about what's going on with people, right? Because I think all of this could have been handled differently if she just said, look, you know, we're, you know, 2 days into this thing and I haven't been anointed yet, and I have to show a body in order to convince the Septon that I'm legit. I can't just follow Alicent's advice and say Aegon's dead, declare him dead without a body and some silent sisters to, you know, prepare the body for burial. But you know, and Corlys is also trying to, you know, speed through the process of reconciliation with his sons. And this is an easy way to do that, is to get them, named. Her father is the one who said, look, I decide who's a bastard and who isn't. And yet she is afraid to make that declarative because she feels, you know, weak in her position, because of her own bastard children. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on in this scene. I thought it was funny when Corlys was like, well, you've obviously figured it out. And she's like, no, really, I haven't. 'Cause, you know, I got this war going on over here. I thought it was odd that Baela wasn't at the dinner, especially when she walks past her later and, you know, she's so cold to her. I would like to hear some actual cold conversation to Baela, explaining, are you blaming me for Jace's death? Are you calling me complicit in going along with his plan? You know, I'd like to hear some actual words out of Rhaenyra's mouth about what's going on concerning Baela, because of that very weird interaction. But to Shannon's point, or maybe it was Jesse's, I'm not sure, you know, both sides can be right and wrong at the same time. And, you know, it's bad timing, I think, in a lot of cases. And she tries to say, look, eventually I will make them legitimate, you know, be patient. And she doesn't also thank him enough for everything that he's gone through. You know, yes, she's grieving her son and everything, but he just went through this terrible trauma in the gullet. He lost his castle, and he even points out to her, he's like, I'm not even asking for damages to my castle or anything. All I'm asking for is for you to make them legitimate. But it definitely seems like a very poor decision on her part, to not be trying to, you know, tighten the bonds with the few people she does trust. And even the people that she's decided she doesn't trust, but they're sort of enemies I know well, you know, you should bring those people from Dragonstone, because, you know, let them be the ones that deal with the middle layer merchants and keep them in line instead of you having to do it. You know, they'll fight amongst themselves. And at least you'll know what the ones from Dragonstone are going to be fighting about because you've had to listen to their crap up to this point. So this whole storyline with Corlys kind of frustrates me a little bit because I think Christine talked about how ultimately we're just going to see that whole family die to serve her. And it feels like that is coming, possibly. The person I really feel bad for, though, is Adam, because he has served her well and he has kind of played by the rules. And, he had an opportunity he could have done anything with that dragon and he decided to go and serve her. So I really felt bad when we saw that disappointment on his face when she just said, "And you're Adam of Hull." And then she literally turned her head away because she didn't want to see his reaction because she knew what she was doing was not really right. So that's a great one. Others?
I want to check in on a conspiracy theory. So I've been a big supporter of Sunfire is dead, and we've been told that multiple times. And people who've been paying attention to that might think that after this episode, I was going, woohoo, I was right. But actually now I'm questioning things. And that is a combination of one line of dialogue and one clip from the trailer for next episode. It was passed on that Bela's report while looking for Vhagar. She only saw one dragon, Sunfire, dead and decaying. Okay, fine. And then we get a shot from next week's episode at Rook's Rest, where we see a dead dragon draped over a castle wall. And if you remember clearly, Sunfire landed in the woods. Meleys landed on the castle. Also, that dragon, if you pause and take a look, is missing a head because they cut Meleys' head off and paraded it through King's Landing. But Bela only saw one dragon dead and decaying. They were killed in the same fight. They can't be that far apart. Bela's looking everywhere. She saw at least one dragon. We see that dragon. That one's very clear to see. Everybody can see it. It's on a castle. But she should know her grandmother's dragon. She should know it well. But she said she saw Sunfire. And only one dragon. I'm confused. Is Sunfire being hidden? If so, why did she think Meleys was Sunfire? Did she somehow manage to not see Meleys? I'm very confused. Was this just misinformation? What is happening? So, that's where I am. And I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on that. Shannon, I know your whole side of this is, I know what happens in the book. Which doesn't really tell us much about what's happening in the show because we've already talked about several things in this episode that didn't happen in the book. So I don't know where to go with this. I want to hear listeners' thoughts.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing other takes on it because my take is the same as it's always been. As you noted, I know what happens in the books. So I think they've been playing this incredibly oddly in terms of long in the dying. What an odd turn of a phrase to use. And then people who weren't there but have heard are assuming dead. And then I don't understand that go scouting and saw Darren rotting. All the things that various reports and people have said within the reality of the show, don't add up to me. And I'm all in favor of adaptive changes. And we were just praising many of them earlier. So without spoiling anything, I'll just say I can't tell and make hide nor hair of what's happening. So I don't have a good answer for you, Christine.
Well, I'm either going to come up. I am famously someone who why are they making a big deal about Jon Snow's mother? I mean, why? who should care, right? So I'm sitting here going,
Exactly.
why should anyone care about a dead dragon? I mean, they said multiple times it's dead on the show. Why are we still talking about this? So, I mean,
At least 5 times.
I mean, that's what, I mean, they keep saying. It's like, why would they go through such a big deal to like, aha, it really wasn't dead? Like, is that the not dead Sunfire is going to change the battle, and make Lord Larys win the Game of Thrones? I don't know. But yeah, I keep going, why are we still debating this? Not you, Christine, the general group, right? Like, oh no, it's alive. No, they're dead. No. You don't understand. It's the old joke, when a conspiracy theorist goes to heaven and says, God, tell me who really killed Kennedy. And he goes, it was Oswald. And the conspiracy goes, wow, this is bigger than I thought.
So it's Schrodinger's dragon. It's dead and alive.
Right.
I like that.
The thing I don't understand is, if the whole point is that this dragon is going to turn out to be not dead, they are doing an absolutely terrible job of making it plausible that it's going to end up being not dead. Because we're going to have Bela, who in the prior episode was out searching for her grandfather, who's a lot smaller than a dragon, across all of the gullet, and she managed to find that, and yet she doesn't recognize her grandmother's dragon.
Oh, yeah. In previous episode, she recognized Kristen Cole from Dragonback.
Yeah. Well, she was flying pretty low then too. But, so I don't understand that, other than they're trying to set her up even more. And I mean that as the writers are trying to create these rifts between Rhaenyra, like, everyone lied to me. And it's like, they're all mistaken. They're all that stupid. It's perplexing. I think we're going to have to see how it all plays out. But, sometimes these people get a little bit too clever for themselves. And we'll see, we'll have to see how it all falls through. Jesse, did you have a highlight and another highlight?
No.
Because I have one that I want to talk about.
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've already talked about it, but I did love the idea that both the king and the queen, both the time they're meeting their constituents, want to, oh yeah, let's help. And the hand's going, nah, can't do that. Can't do that. And they both happen. Like, okay, hey, the Kingswood. Yeah. There's enough. I mean, I'm not saying we go and kill every animal that's there, but if the people are hungry, let's go let them shoot a couple of royal, elks or something. But like, oh no, we can't do that.
Who cares what my forebears would have thought about this? I'm in charge.
Yeah. I mean, like, the people are starving. And then she's like, well, maybe like rabbits and squirrels or something, and they're like, oh, we can't. So I just thought that was an interesting thought, just the way they did that. And, there was a lot of discussion on a couple of episodes podcast I listened to about her being on her period, and right the very moment that, as a woman, she's fighting all this other stuff in that. And Shannon, you may talk about, they really got into this discussion in the book. She bleeds when she sits on the throne, like the throne doesn't accept her. And so they got in the whole this discussion about the blood. But I thought it was just a little, I was hearing female hosts go, of course it would. That's the way everything works, oh, yeah. Right? The worst
That
time.
is exactly how it works.
When she realized it was that time of the month, I was worried, because in the books, what happens the very first time she sits on the throne, like at the end of last episode, she cuts herself. And then you can see blood drops, or some of the people in there can, which means it's a bad sign. It means the throne is rejecting you. And obviously it happened to Viserys, and he lost a couple of fingers because of that. And I think there was a bad ruler before that said that the throne rejected. Anyway, that's a trope that's known within the universe of the show. And I honestly thought, oh my God, they're not going to do that, where she somehow bleeds and people mistake it for her cutting herself on the throne, and that was going to be another strike against her. But I thought the way they handled it was fine. It's like, oh God, this too today, and then it didn't bring it up. So I was actually happy that they didn't go there and make it about that and make it very gendered when they could have. It was just like, what else? I got a splitting headache, or, and they didn't try to tie it to the throne rejecting her or anything having to do with blood.
Yeah, I agree.
I personally thought it just made perfect sense. I mean, aside from it always seems to come at a bad time, the truth is that amount of stress can bring it on. I mean, it's just a result of what was happening to her. And the one thing that could really make this day even worse. Well, yeah, you basically summoned it up with this day. So here it is. And I think it was a nice little note of and this is what else a woman has to deal with in addition to all this other stuff.
Yep, I agree. I wanted to shout out the introduction of a character. I don't remember this person, but at the end of the rat banquet, when she walks out and she meets Sir Torrhen of Manderley, and he basically says, well played. And she's scratching her head to remember who he is. Maybe she met him on the Search for a Prince tour or something, but I don't recall him specifically. But he makes this comment to her. He says, this is a good idea. And maybe people forget it was your blockade that made bread scarce in the first place. And she says, touche, my memory is long and, noted. And I'm really curious what is going to happen to this guy. And I don't know why, but I got a very Roose Bolton vibe out of him. I have no idea if he's important to the story or not, but there was just something about him that made me think of Roose Bolton. So I'm like, is he just a schemer, climber? Is he truly admiring, what she did, or what's going to happen with him? But I thought that was very intriguing that he was introduced in this episode.
We definitely
no spoilers on the character, but he is played by a notable actor, so it made sense to have him stand out from the other lords and ladies there. And I liked his bemused appreciation of the rat serving, while still, if Rhaenyra on a whim could have just, after he made that jab about your blockade, could have just said, somebody stab him, please. But she seemed to appreciate, you got me there,
Well, she did tell him, I'm pillaging your house too,
Well, we definitely haven't seen him before because he was on the list of new cast for this season. And he was in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them movies. And I kept waiting for him to say, yes, I provide baked goods because that was what he did in that. But Roose Bolton comparison is very interesting. I did think at a time when she's without a small council and probably going to be looking for new people, here is one guy who is like, yes, I actually like how you handled this. Oh yes, you're looting my house too. I probably deserve that as well. Well played. It feels like he's trying to weasel his way in, by getting in her good graces, but still being sly about it all. And I honestly look forward to Larys 2.0.
Yeah, I did like that. And I said, okay, this probably is someone important not only because we recognize the actor. That's a pretty high profile cameo if you're just going to do that. I also remember that in the season documents, they had mentioned that this was one of the new characters. So yeah, I don't know what he's going to do, but it was kind of an interesting introduction. He at least showed a little bit of charm, and it looks like a fun character that isn't often we just get dull lords.
Yeah, quick
Nice.
history. They were in the early era. They were in the Reach, but they were exiled from there because people feared they were growing too wealthy and too powerful, and eventually they became allies of House Stark. So, and they remained loyal to the Starks all throughout Game of Thrones. So that's kind of their house's background history. So he's someone that is a lord that comes from a very prosperous place and does have a lot of money. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, that's one thing that Rhaenyra needs for sure. So we talked a little bit about our Sunfire conundrum as a ding or source of concern. Are there any other dings we want to talk about or lowlights? And silence means no. That's totally fine. Unless you're thinking. I'll give you another second.
I believe if we don't wrap this up soon, we're going to lose our Maester Sunshine and Rainbows to rather big football game going on.
Oh, the U.S. dream has ended. They lost 4-1. They got killed. So
they got crushed.
So I'm much happier that I spent the time with you guys versus watching that.
Well, then before we go, I want to add one more highlight, which is the final scene when Rhaenyra is speaking to the Dragon Master, who comes in to tell her that Otto has taken Tumbleton. And at the time that he arrives, she's building this literal pyre of all the green house decorations and paraphernalia to burn it all. And we see her face in those flames, and it made me think of two things. One, it was like literally they're going to be going up in flames by what's coming next potentially. Although her dragon master tells her, they're embedded. The people are embedded with them. We can't just go in there and flame everybody out. But it also made me realize we did not see a funeral for Jace. And that pyre kind of reminded me of, lots of other things that could be, going up in flames and being reflected on for her. It could be, maybe a hard turning point for our queen coming out of this episode.
That was a great shot. Claire Kilner directed again. Did you also notice what was in there along with all the other Hightower, stuff? The bed frame was in there. The one that she couldn't sleep in.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that was also part of it.
Nice.
Cool. You mentioned there wasn't a funeral for Jace. There wasn't a funeral for Lucerys, and there wasn't a funeral for Viserys, the king. We just have not had time for funerals. And that's a shame. And on that note, I think we have killed the podcast.
No, I just was sitting there thinking
No, we went out of order.
Yeah,
so
that's what
I think maybe Jessica got a little confused.
Yeah, I wonder, right, I was thinking that perhaps the dragon that is doing that is that the dragon that they did not take from the fake, son. Is Lord Ormond using the real, son to go and
Daeron.
use the small dragon? Yeah.
Daeron.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. I just thought that might be what's happening. But I did think it was, because seeing the dragon handlers, it felt like the dragon handlers were the ones that were going to bring dragon over and looks like, bad stuff happened. That's all. That's what my thought was on that. Don't know if that's true or not.
I had another thought, actually, another confusion point for me in this episode. This town, Tumbleton, was it?
Yep.
Have we heard about this place before? Because they started talking about it like it was an important place, and I'm like, this name doesn't even sound familiar. What's going on here? Why are there dragon keepers there? And did I miss something?
Hugh Hammer's wife's brother lives in Tumbleton. That's like what we've heard of Tumbleton in this show, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, we have heard of it before, but I don't know. I was confused by the fact that it was a dragon rider that came in, unless like he was part maybe of the Hightower host and was responsible for managing Tessarion, but then why would he come to Rhaenyra to say that? So I don't know why Tumbleton would do that. It's about, I don't know what a league is, but it's in the Reach, about 60 leagues from, King's Landing. So it's fairly close, and it's a prosperous trading town, not that far from King's Landing. But the fact that it was a dragon rider was confusing to me.
Dragon Minder.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever their title is. I was confused why he was there. I was like, so you fled Tumbleton, but I was like, I guess the implication he was one of Tessarion's handlers.
But if you're not a book reader, don't Google it.
I won't.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of confusing points buried in this episode.
Yes.
Some weak bits.
Well, everything's a little askew, because we got Rhaenyra's point of view today. Well, with that, I think we are going to call it a session. Before we go, I want to thank all of our listeners. We hope to hear from you. We love to hear from you. And I want to thank Christine, Shannon, and Jesse for another great council meeting. We will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Buy yourself a new bed.
And maybe find a rat catcher.
Yes.
We'd love to hear our listeners voice thoughts and send us feedback. Call us at 706-927-8478. Stop by our tuningintoscifitv.com blog to record a SpeakPipe message, or check the show notes and leave us comments. From the blog, you can also find links to forum discussions and subscribe to our RSS feed. Call into our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Skype account and leave us a message. Be social with us on our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Facebook page, or follow us at Tuning Into Sci-Fi on Twitter.
You've been listening to Small Council Matters from Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, episode 130, recorded July 7th, 2026.